Hello and welcome. My name is Matthew Marquit, and this is the sixth video in the Beginner's Guide to Construct 3. And in this video, we're going to learn how to create collectible objects and also a user interface that will display said collectible objects. So let's get started by creating a sprite that will represent our object. In this case, I'm going to use a coin. I'm going to double click here in the top area. We're going to choose sprite, hit insert, and I'm going to basically I'll click down here somewhere where the player can easily collect it and find my sprite. Now I've already got the items here, but if you're using Super Platformer Engine like I am, there is the coins. They have a shine and a spin. I'm going to use the spin animation one. So let's start off with that frame, and you'll see there's our coin. I am going to shut this off momentarily to rename the sprite coins, so we don't forget there. So we'll call it coins, and then we'll go back by double clicking to get to our animation editor again. Now in the animation editor, we're going to right click, import frames, and do from files. And we're going to choose 2 to 4 and open that up. So now we have the 4 frames. We're going to change the speed, as you can see over here. Numbers I've already figured out, 8 in the speed, and of course we want it to loop so it keeps spinning. And we're going to name the animation spinning because yes, that's what it's doing. All right, there we go. So if we right click and hit preview, we'll see the spinning. Now, if I was to hit play and run the scene, the character would not be able to do anything with it, but you would see it spinning. And let's actually add a second coin so that we can also collect that one a little bit later too. So we'll put 2 of them in there. Okay, but there needs to be some sort of variable, some sort of way of keeping track of coins as they're collected. So what do we need to do? Well, let's click on the player. And on the player themselves, we're going to add what is known as an instance variable. So right here, we'll click on instance variables, add a new one, and we're going to call this one coins. And we're going to be consistent here. Whoops, we want to get all of that gone. So let's go in and erase the rest of that there. And we're going to leave the type to number and the initial value to 0, of course, because the player would not have collected any coins at the start of the level. So we're going to hit OK with that. So there is our instance variable, coins. All right. Now what we need to do with this, we're going to shut this off, is we need a global event added to the event sheet, or a global variable, I should say. In order to add a global variable, we'll come up here, right click, and we'll do add and global variable. Now all global variables will be added to the top, but we're going to do exactly what we did with the other one by completely taking this out here, calling it coins, leaving it number, and setting initial value to the default 0 and hitting OK, and there you go. So these are 2 separate values. Keep this in mind, right? There's the global one, and then there's the instance one on the player. Right? So these are going to be important as we kind of move ahead here. All right, now if you are not trying to save events, well then go in here, right click, and add a group and call it coins like I did here, and you're going to put these 2 things, this and the other event, down here in both so that we know that those are the coins. But if you are trying to save like I am for this video, I'm just going to add an event. So what we're going to do, I'm actually going to move this over to the side real quick to explain what's happening here, is what we're going to do with this is we're going to have the player, right, on collision with the coins, destroy the coin, add 1 to the player's instance variable over here, and then set the coins to basically what the player's coins are. So it's going to look at the player's coins and set that value, which is the global value, to that number, right? So that's why we needed all these different numbers. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to click on player here, and we're going to choose on collision with another object, and of course choose coins and hit OK. There you go, done, right? But now what we have to do, of course, is those 3 other actions. So coins, we'll come up here and we'll just start to begin to type destroyed, and there it is, right? So it's going to destroy the coin. Now we're going to add another action, and in this case the player is going to add 1, so we're going to type in add. So you see add 2, right? So we'll click on add 2, and so since this is looking at the instance variables of the character, we only have the one called coin, so that's our only option to choose, and the value we want is 1. So you can change it to something else if it's a score, you know, maybe you're doing 500, 1,000, whatever, but in this case 1 collectible equals 1 object, so we'll just leave that to 1. So add 1 to coins, and then lastly we're going to add the system thing here where we basically look for system, and we're going to set, in this case, so we'll start typing in set, and we're going to set the global variable here, or value, right, to be same thing, coins. Now this one is referencing this coins, right, not the global, or the instance variable I should say, and we're going to set that value to look at the player. So it's going to look at whatever the player dot coins, so the instance variable called coins on player, and then set that to be the same number, right? And then we'll just hit done. So that's the kind of the logic behind what's going on here. Now what we need to do is see or have a user interface in order to collect it. Now, I do want to show quickly that this is actually working. Now, without a user interface, we can't tell that it's actually counting numbers behind the scenes, but if you want to make sure, you can always use the debug mode. So this gives us a perfect opportunity to show you debug mode. If I click on debug instead of the play mode here, you'll get this window. Now, if it happens to be collapsed for any reason or small, you can always expand it. I'll just expand a full window, and then this will allow you to kind of lift up. Sometimes I find it collapses down here, and we'll just lift it up. But you can see right here our global variables, right? They're already found down here. Coins are set to 0 by default. But if I go into my level and collect a coin, that changes to 1, and we come over here and collect the second coin. You see it changes to 2. So we know it's working, right? And we can put as many coins as we want, and that will update, right? But of course, there is no user interface to display that. This would only happen, we can only see that in debug. So now we want to give the player this information also with the user interface. So first thing we want to do is create a layer. I'm going to right click in here. I'm going to add a layer to top, and we're going to call this user interface. Now I've already mentioned this before, just UI in this case, but I've already mentioned this before that in the free version of Construct, you can only add 2 layers. And that's one of the things that they limit you to. Now if you have a paid version or the full educational version, you can use infinite amount of layers. But in this case, you only have 2, so you'll have to use one for UI and one for the game. Now, the reason why this is the case is that layers serve as kind of a parallaxing factor. You'll see that as I select the different layers, there's a section called parallax. Now, 100% to 100% is what it follows along with the player 1 to 1, right? But what we want to do is we're going to actually set this to 0, 0, right? So that means it doesn't move at all. So the player might move, and the game's parallaxing is still 100 to 100, but the UI is at 0, which means it won't move at all. And that's kind of important, right? Obviously, because we want it to always be there on the screen. But the cool thing is if you actually do have access to multiple layers, you can do things where you can have stuff like, as I mentioned here, what parallaxing actually does is it creates kind of this sense of depth. So you can have your foreground objects that are kind of closer to the camera moving quicker, while things in the game world itself or the middle ground are moving at normal speed, and then things way back in the background are moving super slow, and it gives you that really awesome sense of depth that can come from 2D games, right? So anyways, like I said, it would be great if you can have it, but unfortunately I can't show it or use it for this, but just be aware of that in the full version. Okay, so the other thing to keep in mind is whatever your top layer is, when you create any new object, it will always default to that top layer. So be mindful of that. So after we're done with the UI, we're going to drag it to the bottom layer so we don't have that issue, right? It will hide the UI so we won't see it when we're testing the game, but we really don't need to see it if we know it's working or whatever until the game's all said and done. All right, and to change layers, I just want to make sure you guys know that. We'll click on a player or any object. You'll see right here where it says layer, there's a drop-down menu. You can choose which layer. So this is how you can change it if for some reason it got put onto the wrong layer, or if you just want to put it on a different layer for other reasons. Okay, so just wanted to quickly show you guys that. All right, so let's create the actual user interface. Now, there's a couple things you can do. You can either use a sprite font or text, right? So there's 2 different ways of doing that. I'll show text quickly. I'll not go through the whole process, but just so you guys have it in case you don't actually have a sprite font like I have. I'm going to double click in here, go over to general, and you'll see that you can either choose text or sprite font. We'll start with text. I'll double click this. You can put it wherever you want. Now remember, if I kind of zoom out here and pan over, whoops, wrong direction, right? You see this dotted line and the black line? That represents our window, right? So we would put the UI kind of in the corner of wherever we wanted it. But anyways, this text, you can see right here, the way you can control it is you can say, you can type in the number, or not the number, the actual what it says. In this case, it just says text, and that's why it says text up here. But you can change the font to be any other font, right? And there's a whole choice of fonts that you have. Change the size, change it to be bold, italic, change the color, and so on, right? But that's up to you, right? So if you don't actually have a sprite font, you can do that. But I'm going to show you how this all works with a sprite font instead. So I just wanted to be sure that you guys were aware of this in case you didn't have a sprite font to use. Let me undo that real quick and delete text over here. So goodbye text, gone. All right, cool. So as I said before, what I want to do now is add the sprite font. So we'll double click in here and we'll choose, in this case, sprite font. And we'll click and add it here. And there's a default sprite font, so if you do want to use that, you're more than welcome. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the one that was found with the Super Platformer engine, and we'll go over here to Menu and Titles, and we'll select in the Font 30B. So this is the one I'm looking for, and I'm going to hit Open, right? So you can see this one looks a little different. Well, it's got white text with this kind of gold numbers and a little plus that's gold or whatever, right? So there you go. That's kind of how this one's done up, and I'm going to basically shut that off. Now, what are the important things to know? This thing looks all jacked up, and I'll explain why that's happening in a while, but in a little bit. But let's put this kind kind of in the corner where we'd expect the UI to be, not too close to the edge, right, or whatever, or too far, but right there. In order to fix this, we got to look at our character width and our character height. So right now this is basically saying like every 16 pixels by 16 pixels is these boxes that it's, you know, assuming that the character set, which is this, right? So if you want to make your own, right, these are all the characters that you would create in these, you know, whatever width pixels that you're doing. So if you wanted to be 16 by 16 in the center of them all, you can even make your own sprite font if you wanted. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to fix this existing one with what this one is set up as. And you can see down here, character width is 7 and height is 9. So I'll scroll down a little bit on that, right? So we'll change width to 7 and of course height to 9, and now it should just read text, which is what this word is up here. But we want to leave this blank because we want the game engine to kind of say what that's going to be using right here, this event. Okay, so that's cool. Now that we have that and where we want it, we can just kind of click off of that and it's great. Everything's cool. Let's go to event sheet and let's add that so that the, as I said before, it will reference that font and kind of put it up there. So let's add an event. And you'll see this is the event that we're adding here. So we're going to add an event where the system for every tick, right, just like the camera, have we set to be every tick. So pretty much constantly look at this. And what we're going to do, and actually let me double check here. So there's a couple things. Sprite font, let's rename it, right, because this is actually important because you'll see it's called Coin UI over here and it needs to be renamed. So that makes sense. So let's call it Coin UI, right, so we know what it is. It could, you know, it could be whatever else. In this case, I'm only doing coins with the user interface, so that's why I call it Coin UI. But you could just simply call it, you know, UI font or whatever you wanted to call it. But anyways, Coin UI, right? It's been set there, and so we're going to add, right click, add, and we're going to do another condition. And in this case, we're going to do the Coin UI as a condition, and we're going to pick the unique ID. Now, the unique ID of the object, you can kind of see over here in the grayed out version, it's actually set to 11 on my object. Down here, you'll see that it was 10 because that was what it was at the time of me making this originally, these notes. But the unique ID right here, right, is 11 on the object. So we want to make sure that that's clicked. So right here, you see I selected it and there's the pick by unique ID. So let's double click that and excuse me, set that to 11 and hit done. Right, so now it's going to every tick and it's going to pick this Coin UI object. What do we want it to do? Well, we want it to display a certain text. So let's have the Coin UI, right? So this sprite font here set a certain thing. So what we want it to do is set text. So let's just type in set, and we have these, you know, different things to choose from, and we're going to choose set text, which is all the way in the bottom here. And what do we want it to say? Well, what we want it to say is look up whatever the player coins is. So remember, we have that player.coins number. So look at the player, look at how many coins are on the player, right? And put that number there. So as we collect them, it will update. We're also going to say and, because we're going to include. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit space, and this is important. So we have a space between the number and then a backslash and then space again and then 10. So in this case, let's just say I have 10 coins. This would be the number of coins or whatever, how many objects, whatever objects you have in the scene. So if you have 50, you know, different things to collect, then you would type in 50 instead. And then I'm going to type in coins, and I'm actually going to type it all in caps because the lower click case in this font looks a little silly. So I'm going to make it all caps, and we'll hit done. Right. So now if I was to hit play, and let's maximize our window here, you'll see our font and everything's working, right? So there's a nice space between it, 0 out of 10 coins. If I collect this, there it is, and we'll collect the other one, there it is. You can see it update. So that's pretty cool, right? And it'll move with the player, right, and always stay in that same corner because of the parallaxing being set to 0 to 0. So once again, hopefully this video helps you guys understand a little bit about collectible objects, how they work, and how we can create a user interface to kind of support that mechanic in our game. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.